I've never seen a priest like this. He wore his cassock and struck the wooden fish, but with just a few moves, he sent the thugs harassing the temple running for their lives. The compassionate abbot coughed from behind, signaling the priest to stop. Obediently, the priest put down the wooden fish. Seeing this, the thugs ordered their underlings to seize the opportunity and surround him. Unexpectedly, the priest, as if protected by deities, used only his hands and feet in a couple of swift kicks, sending the remaining thugs sprawling. The leader of the thugs begged for mercy, but the priest looked up at two intersecting cloud streaks in the sky, interpreting them as a sign from Buddha and God. Immediately after, a flurry of meteor-like punches rained down, sending the leaders straight to hell. This unorthodox priest was He-Il. After the brawl, the incident was reported to the police. The thugs feigned innocence, accusing He-Il of assaulting them. He-Il first threw his bowl of leftover bone broth at the leader, then told the abbot to remove the memory card hidden in his glasses. It contained a recording of the thugs' entire escapade at the temple. It turned out they were henchmen for a corrupt politician, sent to intimidate the abbot into selling the temple land. With the video evidence, the thugs were arrested. The grateful monks thanked He-Il for his help. He-Il humbly smiled, saying that punishing evil transcended religious boundaries, and it was simply the right thing to do. Sang-Don, the altar boy at the church, shared some spicy rice cakes with He-Il and vowed to become a righteous and powerful priest just like him. That day, the church held a memorial service for a deceased priest. Sang-Yon was also present. He-Il noticed a red mark on Sang-Yon's neck and that the boy didn't look well. During the service, He-Il delivered an impassioned sermon, preaching his belief in justice to the congregation. He asserted that anyone who commits a crime, regardless of their power or influence, should face equal punishment. This was He-Il's unwavering belief. Suddenly, Sang-Yon became distressed and collapsed. He-Il quickly carried him outside and rushed him to the hospital. Sang-Yon had a congenital heart condition and was now diagnosed with brain damage, with a slim chance of recovery. Looking at the unconscious Sang-Yon lying in the hospital bed, He-Il's thoughts drifted back to years ago. He remembered when Sang-Yon, still a young boy, first came to the church as an altar boy. Throughout his formative years, the boy had lived and played alongside He-Il at the church. Their bond had grown as close as brothers. Recalling these memories, He-Il couldn't help but tear up. Detective Wu informed He-Il that the real reason for Sang-Yon's collapse was a drug overdose. Detective Wu, He-Il's close friend, was a homicide detective by day and a vigilante by night, fighting injustice alongside He-Il. Of course, neither He-Il nor Detective Wu believed that Sang-Yon, an innocent and kind boy, would use drugs. To uncover the truth, Detective Wu took He-Il to the narcotics division at the police station. He-Il suggested investigating Sang-Yon's social media accounts. However, after checking, they found Sang-Yon's online activity to be completely normal, with no traces of drug involvement. Just then, the narcotics investigation team from the Supreme Prosecutor's Office arrived, announcing they were taking over the drug case related to Sang-Yon. Detective Wu was puzzled. Typically, only major drug trafficking cases warranted the involvement of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office. He-Il also felt something was amiss. In principle, such drug investigations should be handled locally. The Supreme Prosecutor's Office's intervention felt like overkill, highly unusual. After discussing it with Detective Wu, He-Il suspected the Supreme Prosecutor's Office was trying to cover something up. The next morning, He-Il watched the news and, as expected, saw that related articles had been removed. This further confirmed his suspicion. There was definitely something hidden behind this case. To clear Sang-Yon's name, He-Il went to the boys' high school. However, at school, all He-Il heard and saw were malicious judgments from other students about Sang-Yon. They all believed the false rumors. He-Il immediately shouted, then wiped the curses off Sang-Yon's desk. Strangers might misunderstand and criticize Sang-Yon, but he hoped that his classmates, who saw him every day, could have basic faith in him. As He-Il was leaving, a male student called him back. This student was the only one who believed in Sang-Yon. He told He-Il that Sang-Yon had called him the day before the incident. At that time, Sang-yeon said that his phone had been stolen and kept repeating someone's name CT over the phone. Hee-il thanked the student. At the same time, Dark Knight Detective Woo also found a clue. Yesterday, Detective Woo had asked the delivery man in Songsak for help, asking him to photograph anyone suspicious or acting strangely during his deliveries. Songsak, a young man from Thailand, was currently working as a delivery man for a Chinese restaurant in Korea. He was also one of the allies of the Justice League along with Hee-il and Detective Woo. This casting a wide net approach proved effective. Within a day, Songsak and a group of other delivery drivers rode their electric scooters all over Gangnam District, Seoul, capturing countless photos of people buying and selling drugs, hoping to find the person who might have given drugs to Sang-yeon. Among the photos, Hee-il's Justice League allies took action, each tracking and monitoring different locations. After a night, they had a breakthrough. One of the allies noticed a high school student hiding a packet of drugs in a corner. That evening, the student returned to his base, gleefully splitting the money with his accomplices. At this moment, Hee-il arrived, shouting the name CT that Sang-yeon had mentioned before collapsing. A male student in the drug-dealing group stepped forward. Hee-il saw the earphones he had given to Sang-yeon around the student's neck and realized that the student in front of him was the culprit who caused Sang-yeon's overdose. Without a word, Hee-il raised his pinky finger, poked it directly into the student's weak spot, then proceeded to beat his small gang of thugs to a pulp. Faced with a formidable opponent, CT was forced to tell the truth. It turned out that CT was selling drugs when Sang-yeon happened to walk by, witnessed the transaction, and took a picture. Sang-yeon ran away immediately, but CT found his name and school on a test paper he had accidentally dropped. To prevent being exposed, CT not only destroyed Sang-yeon's phone, but also forced him to take a drug. Hee-il asked for the identity of the drug supplier, but CT refused to confess, arguing that a God-believing priest wouldn't do anything bad. True, a priest couldn't torture someone. Hee-il chose to silently signal Detective Woo with his eyes. Then, he started feigning madness, repeatedly smashing his head against bricks. Watching the priest in front of him go berserk, CT was terrified and finally confessed. He revealed the name of a drug supplier. That night, Hee-il and Detective Woo went to Gerald's hideout. The two coordinated seamlessly, knocking Gerald's henchman to the ground in the blink of an eye. Then, with a single move, they subdued Gerald. Hee-il and Detective Woo then casually enjoyed some popcorn while playfully interrogating Gerald. Finally, they obtained a nickname, Fire Eel Busan, from Gerald. They learned that transactions took place on the dark web. This nickname was the only information Gerald had. Hee-il's group left and reported to the police immediately. The narcotics investigation team from the Supreme Prosecutor's office quickly arrived. When they got to the scene, the drug dealers were tied up in a pile. Evidence, including the drugs, was neatly displayed. Downstairs, reporters were frantically taking pictures. Late at night, Hee-il went to the hospital to visit Sang-yeon, who remained in a coma. He prayed to God to help the boy overcome this crisis. Back at the church, Hee-il mournfully prayed for the deceased elder priest he respected. He asked his companions what the late priest would have done in this situation. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone stood up. They all knew that whenever Hee-il said this, it meant he was about to do something dangerous, regardless of their advice. Sure enough, Hee-il asked, "If the nickname is related to Busan, it means that person is in Busan, right?" Before anyone could stop him, Detective Woo nodded. "Right, isn't that obvious?" Taking advantage of the ensuing commotion, Hee-il quietly slipped out and headed to Busan. There, he would find and eradicate the root of the evil. In Busan, Hee-il was greeted by Mr. Ko. Mr. Ko, a former gangster, had gone straight and started a restaurant business. He was one of the supporters of Hee-il's Justice League. While treating Hee-il to dinner, Mr. Ko received a call from Detective Woo, inquiring about Hee-il's whereabouts. Before leaving for Busan, Hee-il had left a message for Detective Woo and his other companions, saying this mission was dangerous, and he didn't want to involve them. Detective Woo, worried about Hee-il, knew that Mr. Ko would be the first person Hee-il would contact in Busan. However, Hee-il had already instructed Mr. Ko. Mr. Ko lied to Detective Wu, claiming he had cut ties with He-il long ago. After deceiving Detective Wu, He-il asked Mr. Ko to help him investigate the nickname Fire Eel he'd heard from the student drug dealers. Unfortunately, too many people used this nickname, making it impossible to investigate them all at once. After instructing Mr. Ko to narrow the search within the drug trade, He-il went to a seminary in Busan. The seminary had previously invited him to be a lecturer. He-il initially refused but now agreed. To find the drug trafficker, he needed a base of operations. On his first day as a lecturer, He-il showed his unique style. Unlike other priests who preached about faith and principles, he enthusiastically called on the seminarians to fight against the world of crime. To combat this hellish world, He-il even uploaded videos of himself practicing taekwondo, requiring the students to perform similar heavenly exercises. But in reality, no one knew that He-il, despite his energetic demeanor, was suffering from an illness. The doctor had diagnosed him with a condition that, if it worsened, would not only cause him physical pain, but could also lead to full-body paralysis. Looking at the sin-filled city shrouded in darkness, He-il decided to keep his illness a secret. He hoped to do more good deeds before he could no longer move, fulfilling his mission as a Barato. In Latin, Barato means warrior, a priest chosen by the Pope, authorized to act secretly in the shadows to enforce justice. He-il became a Barato 4 years ago. Those who support the Barato are called Cosmos. Detective Wu, for example, was He-il's #1 Cosmos. Besides carrying out his Barato duties, life at the seminary was also quite interesting. That evening, the seminary president called He-il, instructing him to go to the police station to bail out a student named Du-Wu. Du-Wu, the class vice representative, was mischievous and troublesome. He was at the police station for fighting with thugs. To bail out Du-Wu, He-il displayed his superb acting skills. With tears in his eyes, he apologized profusely to the police, saying it was all his fault for not guiding his student properly, and begged them to be lenient. Unexpectedly, Du-Wu, who had been lying about being a priest, was exposed by He-il with a single sentence. Since he wasn't a priest, the police proceeded according to the law, detaining Du-Wu for investigation. Surprisingly, a short while later, the cardinal's secretary called the police station. After receiving the call, they released Du-Wu. Leaving the police station, He-il warned Du-Wu not to cause any more trouble. Du-Wu defended himself, explaining that the thug he'd fought had been bullying a disabled person, and he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. After hearing the reason, He-il, while still scolding him verbally, was actually pleased with Du-Wu's righteous act. Because of his frequent troublemaking, the principal wouldn't allow Du-Wu to participate in the elderly care volunteer work like the other students. He-il then told Du-Wu to volunteer with him from now on, even saving his phone number in Du-Wu's phone. A few days later, at the seminary, He-il maintained his unique teaching style, blasting upbeat music and having the students dance along. The principal, witnessing this scene, could only shake his head in defeat. That day, Mr. Ko brought He-il good news. He'd found one of the thugs. This guy was supposedly close with Fire Eel Busan and regularly bought drugs from him. That evening, He-il went to the food stalls, told Mr. Ko to buy more ice, and then headed straight to the thug's hideout. He-il declared he was there to eradicate heresy. In less than half a minute, he had 2 of the thug's underlings on their knees begging for mercy. Inside the bar, the thug was about to harass a waitress when He-il arrived, kicking him across the room. Looking at the trembling, terrified waitress, He-il changed his tone, saying the thug wasn't a heretic to be eradicated, but rather needed an exorcism. With that, he threw the thug into a large bathtub filled with ice. The thug, freezing solid, had no choice but to agree to He-il's terms. Seeing how effective this method was, He-il pulled out a photo of the thug and Fire Eel Busan together, asking where Fire Eel was. The thug played dumb. Seeing this, He-il, laughing maniacally, dumped a large bucket of ice into the tub without hesitation. Terrified, the thug confessed that he was supposed to meet his good brother at a bar. He-il grabbed the phone and ordered the thug to call Fire Eel Busan, saying he wanted to meet to buy drugs. Over the phone, He-il learned Fire Eel Busan's location and then went outside to meet up with Mr. Ko. Mr. Ko, carrying the remaining 2 bags of ice, looked like he'd seen a ghost. He-il was completely clueless about what was going on until Detective Wu suddenly appeared behind him. He-il threw a bag of ice at Detective Wu. Detective Wu was unfortunately hit, but in reality, he had gone through a lot of trouble to get to Busan to help He-il. From the moment Mr. Ko received the call, the Dark Knight Detective Wu had recognized his clumsy lie and knew that He-il and Mr. Ko were together. To get leave for his business trip approved, Detective Wu had resorted to desperate measures. He'd worn panda-like makeup, hidden food in his closet, and lied about having an anxiety disorder. Finally, he managed to trick the chief into giving him a month off. Now, Mr. Ko put on noise-canceling headphones and started listening to music, knowing that He-il and Detective Wu would inevitably start bickering as soon as they saw each other. Argue they did, but He-il still couldn't convince Detective Wu to return to Seoul. At night, the three arrived at a warehouse where Fire-il was supposedly hiding. Before entering, He-il removed the Roman collar from his priestly attire, then slipped through a gap in the warehouse door, pretending he wanted to have a heart-to-heart with Fire-il Busan. Fire-il Busan ordered his men to attack. Suddenly, Detective Wu launched himself into the air with a graceful flying kick. Coupled with his steel-hard head, he slammed directly into the first henchman to charge, knocking him unconscious. He-il stepped forward to fight the thugs hand-to-hand. They swarmed him, but He-il utilized his martial arts skills, sending them sprawling. Fire-il Busan took advantage of the chaos and fled. He-il chased after him, landing a precise throw that hit Fire-il in the back of the neck, subduing him. Fire-il, gasping for breath, couldn't understand who these two reckless individuals were who dared to provoke him. He warned them that his boss wasn't someone to be trifled with. Just as He-il and Detective Wu were about to interrogate Fire-il, a female officer from the Busan Narcotics Unit arrived and shot Fire-il right in the forehead, knocking him unconscious. She then pointed her gun at He-il and Detective Wu, ordering them to put their hands up. Without a word, she cuffed the drug dealers He-il had apprehended, even mistaking He-il and Detective Wu for their accomplices. The officer, Ya-young, was part of the Busan Narcotics Unit, and her mission was to take down the entire drug ring. Detective Wu showed his badge, clarifying that they were on the same side. Ya-young simply tossed his badge aside, completely disbelieving him. Seeing this, He-il pulled out the Roman collar he'd removed earlier, trying to prove he was a priest. Ya-young responded by shoving her gun in his mouth and telling him to be quiet. Both men were then handcuffed and dragged to a sauna along with the captured drug dealers. However, Ya-young quickly found He-il and Detective Wu's records, confirmed their identities, and released them. He-il hoped Ya-young would share information about the drug ring or allow them to participate in the investigation. As expected, Ya-young waved him off, stating it was absolutely impossible. A priest trying to catch drug dealers? Preposterous. That evening, Ya-young took He-il and Detective Wu out as a reward for their efforts. Mr. Ko treated them to a lavish meal. During dinner, He-il analyzed the situation, pointing out that if Fire-il didn't talk, Ya-young wouldn't get any leads. Detective Wu deduced that Ya-young and her colleagues were a small, independent task force. This operation was likely off the books, not reported to higher-ups. The drug organization wouldn't take Fire-il's capture lightly. Ya-young's small team would surely be in danger at a crucial moment. He-il decided to call for backup. He contacted Kyung-sun, a member of his Justice League and someone who had assisted him on past missions. Kyung-sun was on assignment in Los Angeles, but He-il didn't care, insisting she return to Busan immediately. Furthermore, He-il instructed Detective Wu and Mr. Ko to surveil the sauna, closely monitoring any developments in Ja-young's investigation. He, as a lecturer, had to return to the seminary. Despite being back, He-il had no time to rest. Having just wrestled with thugs, he now had to take Du-woo, the seminary's most mischievous student, to do social work. They were to serve the elderly and lonely members of the community. He-il saw the area was severely run down, with many elderly living in poverty and isolation. Du-woo told He-il that the local government didn't care about the well-being of these seniors. He-il felt a pang of sadness. At that moment, an elderly man approached, shakily accusing the priest of being a fraud and a devil. He claimed that God and the hope preached by the church didn't exist. He-il didn't argue with the embittered old man, abandoned by society. He couldn't bring himself to lecture about morality. Just then, an elderly woman struggled to push a cart of scrap metal uphill. Du-woo and Hee-il rushed to help her push the cart home. They then helped her clean her house, cooked instant noodles, and chatted with her. Playful Du-woo told the elderly woman that Father Hee-il was a great singer. Hearing this, she requested a song. Hee-il resigned himself to singing his signature song with all his heart. While eating noodles, the woman cheerfully told Hee-il that she was about to start working at a food factory where she could work sitting down. Hee-il gave her some money, pretending to be wealthy, and told her to buy herself some good food. In reality, he was so poor he had to mend the holes in his own cassock. Hee-il advised Du-woo to stop telling the elderly to have hope. More than sermons, what they needed was companionship and a respite from their loneliness. Just as his business trip officially ended, Kyung-sun arrived in Busan to meet with Hee-il. He recounted Sang-yeon's drugging, instantly enraging Kyung-sun. She vowed to tear apart the drug ring like she was cleaning bacteria out of a comforter. With Kyung-sun, his capable partner, at his side, Hee-il felt energized, like he just chugged a Red Bull. Following Kyung-sun, other members of Hee-il's Justice League arrived in Busan, including the nun and Father Han from his church. All of them, driven by a sense of justice, wanted to fight against evil and refused to let Hee-il face this danger alone. While his allies gathered in Busan, the drug ring was also making moves. Coincidentally, one of the thugs from the warehouse had escaped. He reported to the boss that the attackers were two strange men, one of whom was a priest with Donnie Yen-level martial arts skills. The boss assumed the priest was an undercover cop and ordered his men to find Fire Eel and ensure he didn't reveal anything to the police. This boss, from Southeast Asia, was ruthless and cruel, the very embodiment of evil. Outwardly, he was a handsome and polite corporation president who frequently visited nursing homes, bearing gifts for the elderly, feigning concern, and even promising to help them find suitable, high-paying jobs. But the moment he left the nursing homes, he'd recoil from the lingering smell of old age, frantically dousing himself with cologne. Meanwhile, Ja Young interrogated Fire Eel, promising a reduced sentence if he cooperated. Fire Eel, though seemingly simple, wasn't stupid. He knew that snitching would likely get him killed before he ever saw the outside of a prison. Her colleague warned Ja Young not to report the interrogation of Fire Eel to Prosecutor Nam, as the information would surely leak. They were unaware that Prosecutor Nam was already in the loop. The most promising young prosecutor in the Busan prosecutor's office, driven by personal gain, had long been colluding with the drug ring. Naturally, the handsome boss had taken note of Prosecutor Nam and quickly brought him into the fold, whining and dining him. After their meeting, Prosecutor Nam even offered the services of the police special forces helicopter. However, the drug boss casually revealed Prosecutor Nam's background, a highly capable and cunning prosecutor lacking powerful connections. He promised to help the prosecutor become president within 10 years, in exchange for his protection. Prosecutor Nam immediately withdrew the helicopter offer. The boss, having anticipated this, had already sent men to surveil the prosecutor's parents in their hometown. After some carrot and stick tactics, fueled by their mutual needs, Prosecutor Nam and the boss quickly reached an agreement. As they finalized their deal, a subordinate reported Fire Eel's location. Mr. Ko also received this intel. Through surveillance, he spotted a toy company van parked near the sauna. Inside were likely members of the drug ring, clearly monitoring Ja Young and her colleague. Ja Young and her colleague decided to relocate Fire Eel. Hee-il, Detective Wu, and Mr. Ko followed and witnessed a group of officers from the Violent Crimes Unit raid the sauna. These officers, in cahoots with the drug ring, planned to arrest Detective Han, Ja Young's colleague, on fabricated charges. Detective Han protested, and the officers contacted Prosecutor Nam. This operation was under his direct command. Prosecutor Nam reprimanded the narcotics unit for acting independently and warned the Violent Crimes Unit officers that if Detective Han's team resisted arrest, they were authorized to use live ammunition. During a wiretapped phone call, Detective Jang Ja-young overheard the Violent Crimes Unit police. Worried about her colleagues, she was suddenly confronted by a speeding truck. Ja-young escaped serious injury, but upon exiting her vehicle, she found herself facing a group of armed drug dealers closing in. Just as she was about to be surrounded, a car screeched to a halt. outstepped the dashing priest He-il. Without a word, he launched into the thugs, scattering them like bowling pins. After sizing up the remaining goons, he declared, "Express train to hell," before he and Jia Young proceeded to pummel the remaining thugs in the ensuing chaos. One thug, Fire Eel, attempted to flee, with He-il in hot pursuit. Fire Eel tripped, tumbling like a runaway cotton candy ball for several meters. Just then, police sirens wailed. He-il and Detective Wu urged Jia Young to come with them, warning that if her superiors caught her, she'd be permanently removed from the investigation. Jia Young hesitated, but He-il and Detective Wu, pressed for time, bundled her and the unconscious Fire Eel into their car. Unfortunately, Fire Eel's injuries from the fall proved fatal. He died in the hospital. The situation worsened for He-il and the others. Jia Young learned that her fellow narcotics officers had been arrested, while the drug dealers were released. A warrant was issued for her arrest. Jia Young shared her suspicions about Prosecutor Nam with He-il and Detective Wu. She explained how Nam had repeatedly dismissed drug cases involving influential figures, even receiving promotions for doing so. She was convinced he was connected to the drug ring. To turn the tide, He-il instructed Detective Wu and Mr. Ko to look after Jia Young while he went to meet someone. That someone was Kyung-sun. The resourceful Kyung-sun had already unearthed information about the drug organization. Her research indicated that 2 local drug rings had existed, but their leaders had vanished. She theorized a new organization had emerged, absorbing the previous 2. To expose Prosecutor Nam's corruption, Kyung-sun planned to infiltrate the Busan District Prosecutor's office. He-il asked her to clear Jia Young's warrant once she was inside. Soon after, Kyung-sun started her new job. Her first act was to request the list of wanted individuals. With a few keystrokes, she deleted Jia Young's warrant. Now a free woman, Jia Young, further impressed by He-il's resourcefulness, joined his crusade for justice. Kyung-sun met He-il secretly, reporting that Prosecutor Nam was cautious and difficult to approach. He-il advised that men like Nam, driven by greed and ambition, also craved flattery. Kyung-sun understood. She would play to the prosecutor's vanity, making him complacent and lowering his guard. Amidst his fight against the drug cartel, He-il continued his priestly duties, taking young Du-woo from the monastery on volunteer missions. On one such occasion, He-il saw an elderly woman he had previously cared for being ushered into a van by factory workers, seemingly headed to work. He was unaware that this food processing plant was a front for the drug ring's manufacturing operation, exploiting the elderly from the nursing home as cheap labor. The ringleader warned the seniors against revealing the factory's secrets. The following evening, He-il visited the elderly woman again. This time, he witnessed factory workers bringing her home, but their manner was rough, shoving her carelessly. He-il, unable to tolerate such disrespect, punched one of them, only stopping when the elderly woman intervened. Inside her home, He-il prepared a meal for the woman and asked, "Where exactly do you work?" Fearful, she lied, claiming to make twisted breadsticks. Her hesitation fueled He-il's suspicion. Later that night, he confided in Du-woo about his concerns. The hot-headed youth suggested roughing up the factory workers. He-il cautioned him, advising that fighting evil required a calm mind, saving anger for the final blow. The next day, following He-il's instructions, Du-woo posed as a food deliveryman to tail the factory workers when they picked up the elderly woman. As he suspected, the factory was heavily guarded by intimidating, burly men, unlike any food processing plant he'd seen. Du-woo reported his findings to He-il, solidifying the priest's suspicions. He warned Du-woo to be more cautious in future investigations. While Du-woo investigated, He-il and Detective Wu took Jia Young to the church, introducing her to the nuns and Father Han. At that moment, the drug ring leader arrived. He-il instantly sensed an aura of malice surrounding him. Inside, the elderly priest conducted mass. The kingpin feigned piety, but a sinister smirk betrayed his lack of reverence. He-il also noticed him slipping the priest an enormous donation of 2 billion won. He-il followed the kingpin outside, attempting to return the exorbitant sum, but the man refused, claiming the church needed financial strength to combat Satan. Before leaving, he asked He-il if such a generous donation guaranteed him a place in heaven. He-il retorted that money couldn't buy salvation, but it could certainly pave the road to hell. After Mass, He-Il initiated the next phase of his plan, targeting the drug organization. While they knew Fire Eel was dead, the cartel was still unaware. He-Il planned to exploit this, having Mr. Ko impersonate Fire Eel. They would spread a rumor that Jia Young was a gambler, leveraging Fire Eel's release to extort money from the gang. Soon, they sent a message demanding a 10 billion won ransom, threatening to hand Fire Eel over to national intelligence if they refused. The cartel quickly agreed to a meeting. He-Il and his team prepared meticulously. To maintain Fire Eel's large physique, they stuffed Mr. Ko's clothes with padding. On the night of the meeting, they bound and gagged the disguised Mr. Ko, leaving him nearby wearing a mask. Mr. Ko committed to the role, mimicking Fire Eel's distinctive voice. The cartel's thugs demanded to see the priest. Ya Young and Detective Wu stepped forward, putting on a show, with Ya Young dressed as Harley Quinn. The thugs insisted on seeing their man before paying. Seeing they were hooked, Ya Young ripped off Mr. Ko's mask, revealing the deception and declaring Fire Eel dead. However, the thugs, anticipating a trick, produced Fire Eel's mother, threatening her safety unless they cooperated. The Kingpin had employed a hacker who traced the photo of Fire Eel He-Il had sent, proving it was taken days earlier. He suspected a trap. Just as the thugs thought they had the upper hand, He-Il, dressed as the Joker, appeared atop a carousel. Undeterred, the thugs threatened to kill Fire Eel's mother. Suddenly, she stirred, seemingly rising from her wheelchair. He-Il had anticipated this, having Du Wu move the real mother to safety. The woman in the wheelchair was an actress. The thugs immediately called for reinforcements lying in wait. Unfazed, He-Il and Jia Young charged, swiftly incapacitating dozens of thugs. Just then, the narcotics unit, alerted by He-Il, arrived to make arrests. However, the Kingpin had anticipated this, sending a car crashing into the police vehicles, creating chaos and allowing his men to escape. By the time He-Il and the others arrived, many officers were seriously injured. He-Il chased one of the boss's henchmen, engaging him in a fight, unaware that the boss was watching from afar. This revealed He-Il's true capabilities to the boss. Seeing the boss send more and more henchmen, He-Il remained energetic, challenging them to bring it on. He immediately launched into a fierce battle with the drug gang's thugs. The fight was raging when the police arrived in the nick of time, forcing the gang to retreat en masse. That evening, to avoid the enemy's eyes, He-Il and Kyung-sun took cute sticker photos while exchanging information. He-Il told Kyung-sun that tonight's attackers weren't ordinary thugs, but professional assassins from Southeast Asia. This meant the drug organization might also originate from Southeast Asia. Furthermore, He-Il instructed Kyung-sun to cater to the male prosecutor, building a close relationship with him to extract information. To facilitate Kyung-sun's mission, He-Il even provided her with a luxury car. The drug boss had witnessed the night's battle and realized He-Il wasn't an ordinary priest. However, he had no intention of eliminating He-Il yet. For him, a strong opponent was a rare pleasure in life. To uncover the drug organization's identity, He-Il began searching online. He'd seen a lizard tattoo on one of the henchmen's arms last night, but despite scouring the internet, he couldn't find any useful information. Growing impatient, He-Il contacted his two other companions. One was the chubby guy from the convenience store, and the other was Song-sak, the Thai delivery worker. Both friends were complaining that He-Il had forgotten them and swore they wouldn't answer his calls. As a result, the moment He-Il's phone rang, they both rushed to answer on speakerphone. He-Il told them to come immediately. Without a word, both hopped on their electric scooters and sped off to Busan. Meanwhile, Detective Wu, He-Il's partner, and Officer Jia Young were attempting to use facial recognition technology to identify the assassin from the previous night, but they were unsuccessful all evening. With some free time, He-Il and his companions decided to find something to do, which was to plan a scheme to punish some wrongdoers. Their targets were police officers colluding with the drug traffickers. After formulating their plan, they went to a construction site to surveil these officers. Sure enough, they saw the police meeting with local smugglers. With the motto, "Evildoers must be severely punished," He-Il yelled, appearing before the criminals and police. However, immediately after delivering his cool line, he accidentally tumbled down a sand pile. One of the officers cursed and approached He-il. Unexpectedly, He-il unleashed a swift kick followed by a slap, instructing the thugs to apply the numbing ointment from the crate. Otherwise, he threatened to beat them to a pulp. The thugs immediately obeyed, applying the ointment to their faces before roaring and charging at He-il. To their surprise, He-il was adept in martial arts techniques from wuxia novels, pressure pointing each one, freezing them in place. At this point, the police officers realized the man before them was the legendary priest. They scrambled to escape, but upon opening their car doors, they were met by Officer Jia Young and Detective Wu wielding stun batons, bringing them crashing to the ground. The next morning, the crates the smugglers had intended to traffic were displayed somewhere, alongside the police officers, bound and gagged in mats, unable to move. The surrounding crowd cheered and took photos. At that moment, Mr. Ko called, saying he had facial recognition results. One of the assassins was named Herring. Mr. Ko had a nagging feeling he'd met him somewhere before. That day, Mr. Ko returned to his restaurant, pondering Herring while uncontrollably passing gas. Finally, this bodily function unlocked his memory. Mr. Ko immediately contacted He-il. It turned out Herring had attended cooking classes with him. That night, He-il, Inspector Wu, and Jia Young staked out the classroom. Mr. Ko texted them, informing them that Herring visited the classroom every night because he had a crush on the teacher. Soon enough, Herring arrived at the classroom door with a gift and a bouquet of roses, seemingly ready to confess his feelings. The three started a betting pool. He-il bet Herring would be rejected. Inspector Wu wagered he'd have the flowers and a fruit presumably part of the gift thrown at him. Jia Young confidently asserted that Herring would also get slapped. While waiting for the confession to unfold, the trio munched on popcorn, comfortably perched outside the classroom. It didn't take long for the outcome to become clear. As expected, women understand women best. Before Herring's eyes, not only was he harshly rejected by the teacher, but he also had the fruit and flowers hurled at him, followed by a resounding slap across the face. After his disastrous confession, Herring wiped away his tears while answering a call from the boss. In his car, Herring cried his eyes out. He-il, Wu, and Jia Young quickly followed Herring in their car. They tracked him to a warehouse. Other henchmen were moving drugs outside while inside, more were merrily packaging narcotics into dried fish. He-il made his entrance, declaring that he was delivering the drug traffickers a grand opening gift. Meanwhile, the gang's drug manufacturing operation continued to exploit elderly workers. An elderly woman believed they were producing candy and cookies. The drug traffickers even gave her a hidden cop pill, falsely claiming it was for the flu. The woman believed them and took the pill. That night, she experienced nightmarish hallucinations due to the drug's effects. Du Wu, a medical student, visited the elderly woman and noticed her severe cough. He also detected a chemical odor on her. He suspected something was amiss at the factory where she worked. Du Wu shared his suspicions with He-il. He-il instructed Du Wu to take the woman to the hospital first and then investigate the cookie factory. Du Wu followed He-il's instructions. The next morning, the elderly woman, after a night's sleep, woke up unusually refreshed and radiant. Immediately afterward, Du Wu went to the Food and Drug Administration, voicing his concerns about the cookie factory. However, no matter how he explained it, the officials remained indifferent and unconcerned. Helpless, Du Wu had no choice but to sneak into the factory. Unsurprisingly, he was quickly discovered by the factory's henchmen and thrown out. That night, the elderly woman suddenly collapsed while working after taking the pill. She appeared to have stopped breathing. To cover up their crime, the henchmen hurriedly carried her home, placed her in bed, and staged the scene to look like she had died in her sleep. As for Kyung-sun, to gain Prosecutor Nam's trust, she proactively asked him to assign her some minor drug trafficking cases. After receiving the cases, Kyung-sun swiftly obtained confessions from the drug traffickers, leaving Prosecutor Nam astonished. Over the phone, Prosecutor Nam told his senior that the newly arrived female prosecutor was full of crazy energy. That night, Prosecutor Nam met with the drug trafficking ringleader. For several days, Chief Prosecutor Park had been plotting to remove Prosecutor Nam on corruption charges. To strike first, Prosecutor Nam needed the gang leader's help. During their conversation, the gang leader lamented that only 2 men were enjoying the delicious food on the table. Hearing this, Prosecutor Nam immediately called Kyung-sun to join them for dinner. After days of observation, Prosecutor Nam was increasingly pleased with Kyung-sun, a subordinate who was both competent and adept at flattery. Kyung-sun arrived at the restaurant just as the gang boss went to the restroom to take a phone call. Prosecutor Nam said he wanted to introduce Kyung-sun to a successful young entrepreneur. Kyung-sun thought to herself, finally, Prosecutor Nam is about to reveal his sponsor. Next, Prosecutor Nam hinted to Kyung-sun whether she would be willing to take the fall for him on bribery charges. In return, he promised to pave the way for a bright future for her. Since Prosecutor Nam seemed to trust her, Kyung-sun pretended to agree immediately, while thinking to herself, "My hair is a little greasy. I should have washed it before going out today." At that moment, the gang boss emerged from the restroom. Guy Hong-sun brushed his hair back and turned around. In an instant, the gang boss's heart skipped a beat. In his eyes, the beautiful woman before him stood as if in a field of flowers, walking straight into his heart. At the table, the gang boss shyly introduced himself to Kyung-sun. Kyung-sun immediately sensed his intense gaze. At this point, she had no idea that the man in front of her was her greatest enemy. The gang boss, smitten at first sight, asked if she was married. Upon learning that Kyung-sun was single, his face flushed. Before leaving, the gang boss asked Kyung-sun for her business card. Guy Hong-sun excused herself, saying she hadn't had any made yet. He watched her walk away, a look of infatuation on his face. The next day, the gang boss, passing by a street, saw a banner advertising a meteor shower and immediately called Kyung-sun, inviting the beautiful prosecutor to watch the once-in-60 years event with him. Unexpectedly, Kyung-sun made up an excuse, falsely claiming to have a phobia of meteors falling from the sky. Rejected, the gang boss was deeply disappointed. Meanwhile, Hee-il and his team followed the drug gang's underlings to a warehouse, where they discovered them packaging drugs. Without a word, Hee-il stormed in and fought them, quickly subduing the entire group. He then forced them to carry the boxes of drugs onto a truck for confiscation. In addition to confiscating the drugs, Hee-il instructed Inspector Wu to put specialized headgear on the underlings. In an instant, those wearing the headgear collapsed unconscious. Hee-il and his team then transferred all the drugs to their own vehicle. According to Jia Young's initial estimate, the drugs, if released onto the market, would have addicted at least 1 million people. Upon learning that the drugs had been seized, the gang boss, surprisingly, wasn't angry, but instead ordered his underlings to immediately package and sell the remaining drugs. Elsewhere, Du Wu, the seminary student, snuck into the cookie factory, but was discovered and thrown out. Du Wu suspected something was amiss at the factory, but the police refused to believe him. The seminary president, learning of Du Wu's latest trouble, personally went to the police station to pick him up, ordering him to stay on campus and attend a disciplinary hearing. Left with no other choice, Du Wu contacted Hee-il, telling him about his predicament and asking him to check on his elderly neighbor. As she wasn't answering her phone, he was very worried. When Hee-il arrived at the elderly woman's house, he found her deceased. Upon hearing of her death, Du Wu quietly slipped away from the seminary, grieving and weeping beside her body. Hee-il wanted an autopsy performed, but the police, having received a call from Prosecutor Nam earlier, falsely informed Hee-il that she had died of natural causes. That evening, Hee-il and Du Wu prayed for the elderly woman. Unexpectedly, the police informed them that her body would be cremated soon. Hee-il voiced his suspicions. He had smelled gasoline on her and found a gray substance under her fingernails. However, the police remained unconcerned. Furious, Hee-il lost his temper with the police, declaring that if they didn't investigate thoroughly, he wouldn't stand idly by. The priest believed that her death was definitely connected to the cookie factory. Hee-il, also suspicious, resolved to thoroughly investigate the factory. That night, the gang boss was directing his men in packaging drugs inside the factory when the alarm suddenly blared. It was Seoul's narcotics task force. Armed with guns and K9 units, the task force stormed the factory and conducted a thorough search. Unexpectedly, what they found wasn't drugs, but ingredients for burn ointment. Even the highly sensitive drug dogs couldn't detect anything unusual. After contacting their superiors, the task force had to retreat. Later, Prosecutor Nam asked the gang boss how he had managed to evade the search. The boss revealed that his organization had developed something that could neutralize the dog's sense of smell. He-Il, hiding nearby, witnessed the organization outsmarting the task force. To confirm, He-Il and his team checked the seized drugs in the task force's van. Sure enough, it wasn't drugs but burn ointment. Clearly, the gang boss had anticipated He-Il's arrival at the factory. He-Il frowned in frustration, his eyes reddening. He and his team then went to the docks near the factory where the elderly woman and other seniors worked. He-Il knew that since the narcotics task force found nothing, other agencies would be useless as well. So, He-Il decided to implement a two-pronged plan. He planned to have Inspector Wu infiltrate the factory as an undercover agent. Before the undercover plan could be executed, He-Il received news that the police were going to cremate the elderly woman's body. He rushed to the scene. He-Il and Du-Wu desperately tried to stop them, but the police threatened them with tasers. Du-Wu shielded He-Il. Surprisingly, Du-Wu was unaffected, but He-Il, while grabbing Du-Wu's shoulder, was shocked and collapsed. When He-Il woke up, he and Du-Wu were locked in a holding cell. He-Il couldn't understand why Du-Wu was unharmed by the taser. Du-Wu speculated that his body might be a superconductor. Just then, the school principal arrived to bail them out, demanding they return to school immediately for a disciplinary hearing. He-Il and Du-Wu slipped away while the principal was distracted. They arrived at the crematorium, but it was too late. The elderly woman's body was being cremated. He-Il was overcome with grief. So was Du-Wu. A poor elderly woman had died, yet those working for the state treated her worse than a stray dog. This incident further solidified He-Il's sense of mission. He had to fight the evils of the world. Du-Wu declared resolutely that he wanted to join He-Il's righteous army. After paying their respects to the deceased woman, He-Il and Du-Wu returned to school. They still had to attend the disciplinary hearing. Worried that Du-Wu would be expelled, He-Il told Du-Wu to wait outside and told the principal that he would take Du-Wu's punishment. The principal refused, wanting to suspend Du-Wu for a semester. He-Il pleaded with the principal to retract the punishment. In return, he promised not to lose his temper for a month. For someone with a fiery temper like He-Il, this was a significant punishment. After dealing with Du-Wu's situation, He-Il went to the Bizarre Art Museum to secretly meet Kyung-sun. Kyung-sun told He-Il that Prosecutor Nam held leverage over many high-ranking officials. He-Il instructed her to find out what these weaknesses were so they could exploit them. Then, they played the game Ride the Three-Legged Chicken. Kyung-sun revealed that she had completely captivated Prosecutor Nam's sponsor. Hearing Kyung-sun's description of this sponsor, He-Il immediately thought of the wealthy devotee who had donated 2 billion won to the church a few days prior. To extract information, He-Il told Kyung-sun to treat this sponsor like a member of the opposite sex. Kyung-sun replied that she didn't like long legs. Except for He-Il, of course. After playing Dragon Slayer Warrior, He-Il told Kyung-sun about the plan to infiltrate the drug organization and pulled out a list of wanted criminals from the police station. Kyung-sun immediately spotted a wanted criminal named Han Mo, who looked exactly like Inspector Wu. This was He-Il's plan, to have Inspector Wu impersonate the wanted criminal and infiltrate the organization. Detective Wu, of course, disagreed, especially since Han Mo had a very noticeable birthmark. His colleagues planned to use makeup to replicate the birthmark, but Detective Wu was prone to sweating. After this suggestion, the colleagues exchanged knowing glances. Then, the two members who had arrived in Busan the previous day, including the chubby one, held Detective Wu from behind. Song-sak delivered a swift Thai-style kick to Detective Wu's face. Sure enough, a perfect replica of the birthmark appeared on Detective Wu's face, so convincing even his own parents wouldn't recognize him. Besides Detective Wu, the wanted poster also mentioned Han Mo had 2 accomplices, a lover, and coincidentally, the Thai man and the chubby man matched the descriptions of the accomplices. The lover role could only be played by Ja Young. That night, the 4 disguised themselves and prepared to set off, planning to go straight to the drug cartel's hideout. At the same time, He-il was praying in the church, hoping God would guide him to dispel the darkness and witness the light. However, after finishing his prayer, He-il suddenly felt a headache and then fainted on the spot due to discomfort. When he woke up, He-il saw the statue of the Virgin Mary in the seminary on fire. In that moment, an uncontrollable rage surged within him. As the statue burned, a drone flew over He-il's head. He knew someone had deliberately set the fire and was brazenly watching the scene unfold. He-il chased after the drone, only to find the operator nearby, who yelled and ran away. He-il told the principal about his suspicions. He believed the local drug cartel was responsible for the incident. The principal didn't understand why a priest like He-il was investigating a criminal organization, especially while accompanied by his troublesome student. He-il explained that he had to intervene because the police were incompetent. Realizing that He-il wasn't at the seminary to do honest work, the principal ordered him to leave. However, He-il was undeterred, declaring that their deal wasn't over yet. Previously, to prevent Du-woo from being expelled, He-il had made an agreement with the principal. He asked the principal to retract Du-woo's punishment and tacitly agree to everything he did at the school. In return, He-il promised to sell out tickets for every church service within a month and triple the seminary's enrollment applications the following year. At the time, the principal had agreed. Now, He-il demanded that the principal keep his promise. But soon, his actions were discovered by Prosecutor Nam. Prosecutor Nam investigated He-il's background and discovered he was indeed no ordinary priest. It turned out that He-il was a former top agent of the National Intelligence Service's Counter-Terrorism Task Force. After learning He-il's identity, Prosecutor Nam invited him to the beach for a talk. He threatened that if He-il dared to interfere in other people's business again, the innocent people around him would die one by one. Unexpectedly, He-il was completely unafraid. On the contrary, he told Prosecutor Nam to worry about himself. Prosecutor Nam was ruthless and had recently used a borrowed knife to kill Scheme, exploiting his relationship with the drug lord to eliminate a rival prosecutor. Prosecutor Nam thought he had covered his tracks. Late at night, he went to a secret location. But unexpectedly, Kyung-sun had followed him there. It turned out that yesterday, He-il had given Kyung-sun a special piece of paper. A tracking chip was embedded inside the paper. Gom-sun deliberately used this paper to print work documents and then gave it to Prosecutor Nam. Now, the paper was in Prosecutor Nam's bag. To follow him, Kyung-sun wore a hood, looking like she was about to rob a bank, and stealthily trailed Prosecutor Nam to the secret location. Prosecutor Nam was an odd one. He meticulously documented every criminal misstep of his rivals on video, compiling a trove of blackmail to leverage for his future career advancement. Lately, He-il had been racking his brain trying to find information on a drug trafficking ring, but hadn't uncovered a single lead. Frustrated, he reached out to a contact familiar with Southeast Asia. The contact told him about a notorious drug organization in the Golden Triangle called Sabin. The organization's core figure was a man named Fukin, but rumors had recently surfaced that Fukin had mysteriously disappeared with his forces. He-il suspected Fukin might have come to Korea, plotting to build a drug empire there. The problem was, neither He-il nor his contact knew Fukin's true identity. While He-il investigated Fukin, the drug lord himself was experiencing a touch of romance. The radio was abuzz with news of a once-in-60 years meteor shower. The drug lord calculated that if he missed this one, he'd have to wait until he was 100 years old to see the next. This thought spurred him to call Kyung-sun, his secret crush, and invite her to watch the meteor shower with him the following day. But Kyung-sun made excuses, falsely claiming there was a superstition that bad luck followed witnessing a meteor shower. As an example, she cited the movie A Better Tomorrow, where Chow Yun-fat's character was shot dead right after watching a meteor shower. While the drug lord suffered a romantic setback, He-il and his Justice League team were planning their infiltration of the enemy's lair. Their goal, to gather information and uncover the drug lord's true identity. Detective Wu would pose as a wanted criminal. Ya Young would play his girlfriend. Chief Ko had discovered that the girlfriend character was also a shaman, so Ja Young donned a shamanistic outfit in preparation. Detective Wu and the team went to a bar, encountering some low-level thugs from the drug organization. The thugs, amused and dismissive, underestimated the newcomers. Without hesitation, Isongsak stepped in, roughing them up and claiming they were there to kill Priest Hee-il. After giving the thugs a good scare, Detective Wu and the team went out for a celebratory meal. There, Detective Wu received news that the thugs had revealed the location of a meeting with their superiors. Without delay, Detective Wu and his team rushed to the location. This time, they faced higher-ranking thugs. Upon meeting, the thugs immediately recognized Detective Wu as resembling a certain police officer, and Jia Young as resembling a certain policewoman. Fortunately, just then, a lower-ranking thug approached Detective Wu, mistaking him for an acquaintance. This alleviated the thug's suspicions, and they invited the group to their office to discuss the details of killing the priest. However, before entering the office, everyone had to surrender all their belongings, especially their phones. During the check, the thugs discovered that Detective Wu was carrying 2 packs of toothpicks. They immediately became suspicious, thinking these were some newfangled assassin's weapons. Inside the large office, Detective Wu and the team met the thugs' captain. They pretended to be fierce, declaring their determination to kill the priest for ruining a multi-million-dollar deal. Unexpectedly, the captain told them they couldn't kill the priest yet, as the chairman had given specific instructions. To appease them, the captain decided to keep them there for the time being, providing food and lodging. Just when they thought they'd successfully infiltrated the enemy's den, a low-ranking thug expressed his suspicion about Detective Wu's identity. He worried that Detective Wu was, in fact, the police officer. The captain quietly confided that he shared the same suspicion and had already sent his men to follow both Hee-il and Detective Wu. Before long, one of the henchmen sent a secretly taken photo. Look, Detective Wu was eating with Hee-il outside. The timestamp, 20 seconds ago. Just when they thought Detective Wu was in the clear, one of the goons noticed that the red birthmark on Detective Wu's face seemed to have faded slightly. In a moment of panic, Ya Young blurted out that Detective Wu was using skin whitening essence. This finally convinced the gang leader and his henchmen that they were telling the truth. After being escorted to a guest room to rest, Detective Wu pulled a high-tech mini-phone from his pants. This was a gadget Hee-il had prepared for him earlier. A toothpick served as a makeshift stylus for the tiny keypad. Using the mini-phone and toothpick, Detective Wu called his uncle. It turned out the man having lunch with Hee-il and captured in the photo was Detective Wu's uncle, who bore a striking resemblance to him. That day, to gain the gang's trust, Detective Wu and the others had dinner with them, engaging in friendly conversation. Once they had established a rapport, it was Ya Young's turn to act. Ya Young had previously investigated one of the henchmen, learning about his past misdeeds. She then lied, claiming his misfortune was karmic retribution for his actions, reflected in his appearance. The henchman genuinely believed Ja Young possessed precognitive abilities. Seizing the opportunity, Ja Young said that to change his fate, she needed to read his boss's fortune. The henchman immediately agreed to show them a picture of his boss. Everyone was stunned when they saw the photo. It turned out the boss they had been searching for was a wealthy businessman known for his charitable donations to the church. That very day, the wealthy businessman was at the church for a fundraising event. Hee-il received a call from Ja Young and the others, informing him of the businessman's true identity. Enraged by this revelation, Hee-il confronted the businessman, whose cover was now blown. A fierce fight erupted between them. During the brawl, Hee-il's old injury flared up, putting him at a disadvantage. Just as the boss was about to finish Hee-il off, his phone rang. He answered to find Kyung-sun, the woman he secretly loved, on the other end. Priest Han had contacted Kyung-sun, revealing the boss's true nature to save Hee-il. Kyung-sun then offered to go on a shooting star ride with the boss, a romantic gesture. Overjoyed that the woman he loved had accepted his invitation, the boss was momentarily distracted. After hanging up, a strange crate slowly approached him. Preoccupied, and just as he was about to deliver a fatal blow to Hee-il, the police's SWAT team stormed the scene, guns drawn. A short, stout woman emerged from the crate and ordered everyone present, except Hee-il, to be taken into custody. Hee-il was astonished to discover that the unassuming woman was the chief of police. The boss was taken to a holding cell. Hee-il, elated, went to see the chief. The chief was already aware of the boss's criminal activities. Hee-il hoped she would bring down the entire gang. However, the chief, timid and averse to trouble, confessed that she had only intervened to save He-Il. Just as the chief of police predicted, thanks to money and connections, the boss was soon walking free from the detention room. Before leaving, he didn't forget to threaten He-Il, declaring that this place would become his country and paradise, where he would completely destroy the drug trafficking organization. He-Il secretly met with Kyung-sun, revealing crucial information. This information was sent to He-Il that morning by his friend, the bookstore owner. The content revealed that Vu Ken, a key figure in the Southeast Asian drug trafficking organization, had a rather brutal habit. Whenever his identity was exposed, Vu Ken would detonate a ship and escape. The explosive power could cause hundreds, even thousands of casualties. That wasn't even the most serious part. More importantly, if discovered by the police, Vu Ken would use poison gas to massacre the entire drug-producing village. If the bomb and the poison gas detonated simultaneously in the area within 10 minutes, at least 3,000 people would die. He-Il believed that the drug organization's lair was the ship anchored at the port, which he was certain was already rigged with explosives. In addition, there might be a poison gas tower somewhere in the area. The urgent task now was for Inspector Wu and the others who had infiltrated the organization to locate the bomb. The task of finding the poison gas tower would be entrusted to Kyung-sun. To carry out her mission, Kyung-sun started getting close to the boss. She went to the observatory as promised. In front of the woman he secretly loved, the boss shyly took off his jacket, revealing a t-shirt with a star print. This was his romantic gesture towards Kyung-sun. To impress her, the boss had even studied constellations. He put his arm around Kyung-sun, gently pointing out the stars in the sky. When interacting with Kyung-sun, the boss always abandoned his usual ruthlessness and coldness. That evening, during dinner, he told Kyung-sun about the origin of his name. Afterward, he shyly gave her a gift, claiming it was just a small token of his affection. The next day, fueled by curiosity, Kyung-sun opened the gift and was stunned. It was a huge and magnificent necklace. Kyung-sun suspected it was a fake, but felt that someone like the boss wouldn't give a fake gift. So she took it to a jeweler for appraisal. The jeweler offered to buy it for nearly 3 billion. He explained that the necklace was something only Southeast Asian royalty would possess. Kyung-sun was speechless. After regaining her composure, she thought that a man who spent money like the boss must be a novice in romance. She was certain she would have him wrapped around her finger. To implement her plan, Kyung-sun decided to lay down some bait. The first step was to return the necklace to the boss, claiming she wasn't the kind of gold digger he thought she was. The boss hastily explained that he simply thought the necklace suited her perfectly. Kyung-sun pretended not to hear his explanation and stood up to leave. When meeting with the male prosecutor, the boss even suggested that Kyung-sun quit her job, promising to open a luxurious law office for her. That night, while the male prosecutor was working late, documenting records, He-Il went to his secret location to steal the confidential documents he had hidden. Unexpectedly, just as he snuck in and started to pry open the door, someone knocked him unconscious from behind. Elsewhere, He-Il's teammates from the Righteous League were still hiding within the drug trafficking organization, waiting for the right moment to act. Everyone was worried about He-Il's safety. Fortunately, He-Il had sent a message to Inspector Wu, arranging to meet at 7 p.m. at a certain restaurant. Inspector Wu and the others lied, saying they wanted to visit their elderly mothers. The organization's henchmen weren't fools and wondered why everyone wanted to go together. Ya Young quickly lied, saying she wanted to meet her future mother-in-law. Fatty and Song S1 EBF followed suit, both claiming to miss their mothers. Touched by everyone's apparent longing for their mothers, the team leader agreed to let them go. The fat guy in the organization, the more he looked at Detective Wu, the more he thought he resembled that cop. Still uneasy, he decided to make a bet with the team leader. He sent his underlings to tail Detective Wu and the others. If he was wrong, he'd take 2 slaps to the face. At 7 p.m., Detective Wu and the others arrived at a restaurant. Everything went according to plan. They already knew the goons were watching from outside, so they had a nun pose as Detective Wu's mother. Hunching over in front of the underlings, they put on a touching scene. Mother and son embraced, sobbing dramatically. The underlings, witnessing this, were moved to tears. Hearing that his men had cried, the team leader slapped the fat guy twice. After the underlings left, Detective Wu and the others examined the information He-Il had given the nun to deliver. The nun relayed He-Il's message, instructing them to locate the explosives on the ship. However, finding the bomb required specialized equipment. They needed the chubby guy's help for this. It turned out the chubby guy possessed a legendary superpower, the ability to detect the high-frequency sounds emitted by explosives using his ears. However, upon returning to the drug trafficker's den, Detective Wu and the others discovered the underlings hardly ever left. Finding an opportunity to search for the explosives would be difficult. Just then, the boss returned to the den, demanding that Detective Wu and the others stop being freeloaders and take charge of guiding a shipment soon to be transported to Thailand. Their opportunity had arrived, and everyone immediately began to prepare. While the henchmen were busy moving the merchandise, M-180P removed the battery from a battery-powered stuffed animal and used his palm to create an electrical contact, trying to pinpoint the high-frequency sound on the ship. Just when he thought he was on the verge of finding it, the captain called out Inspector Wu's real name, seemingly blowing their cover. Meanwhile, the Kingpin, having learned that his information in Southeast Asia had been compromised, went to the bookstore without hesitation and knocked out He-Il's friend, the owner, to help He-Il. Du Wu, at the seminary, rallied some deacons to plan an anti-drug campaign, then headed to a nursing home to educate the elderly on the issue. As it involved drugs, some deacons were a bit apprehensive, but Du Wu boosted their spirits, reminding them of Father He-Il's teachings and urging them to become courageous priests. According to plan, Du Wu and the other deacons went to a residential area, holding up signs that read, "Don't buy drugs, don't sell drugs," and shouting righteous slogans to the surrounding residents. Prosecutor Nam, worried that these young men would set a bad example, suggested to the Kingpin that they be taught a lesson, and the two agreed. The Kingpin sent a large number of people to the seminary to beat up the students there. As the students were being beaten within an inch of their lives, He-Il rode in on his motorcycle in a heroic manner, quickly taking down the henchmen. However, in the process, He-Il was attacked from behind by a henchman, bleeding profusely, and fell unconscious to the ground. After being taken to the hospital, He-Il's two companions, Father Han and the nun, learned that He-Il had multiple sclerosis and had been taking medication for it. While in a coma, He-Il dreamed of the deceased fake priest, who taught him to share the pain and trust his teammates. Thanks to the old priest's reminder, He-Il regained his faith and finally woke up. That night, the police chief came to the hospital room, hoping He-Il would hear her confession. Initially, after taking office, the police chief had intended to eradicate the drug trafficking organization. But at that time, members of the Major Crimes Unit colluded with the drug traffickers, and no one would listen to her orders. Later, the police chief's mother was even captured by the organization. To protect her mother, the police chief had no choice but to turn a blind eye. This time, the police chief planned to cooperate with He-Il to bring the drug dealers to justice. He-Il confidently assured her that there would be no problem because he was an expert at turning the tables. After meeting with the police chief, He-Il disregarded his condition and rushed to discharge himself from the hospital. Father Han and the nun tried to dissuade him, but He-Il quickly made up an excuse and slipped away. After being discharged from the hospital, He-Il met the student Du Wu. Yesterday, from Father Han and the nun, the principal and Du Wu learned that He-Il was carrying out the mission of a Bagato, understanding that his purpose was to fulfill the mission that God had given him, helping and protecting the vulnerable. Du Wu yearned to become his partner, punishing the wicked together. He-Il told Du Wu that from today on, he and Du Wu would be members of the citizen patrol team under the police chief, responsible for participating in the investigation of the flower case. Since regaining her spirit, the police chief had completely awakened, and she decided to announce the establishment of a completely new anti-drug team. From now on, drug case investigations would no longer be carried out by the Major Crimes Unit, and what surprised the Major Crimes Unit was that the leader of the newly established team was a puppet in the hands of the police chief. The Major Crimes Unit initially thought the police chief was joking. Unexpectedly, He-Il walked up and feigned a friendly handshake and greeting with the dummy. Following that, the Major Crimes Unit contacted Prosecutor Nam, colluding with his team, hoping he could help resolve the situation. Prosecutor Nam cursed out the police chief as a lunatic, but was powerless because the prosecutor's office couldn't interfere with the police department's personnel orders. Meanwhile, after choosing Hee-il and Du-woo as his assistants, the police chief went to a gym. This was a place used by a corrupt cop who was in cahoots with drug dealers to package narcotics. The three didn't waste any words, they charged straight into the gym. With excellent coordination, they quickly subdued the henchmen inside. The drug lord's lackeys urged him to leave immediately, saying the current situation was too dangerous now that the police chief had shown his face. Just then, District Attorney Kyung-sun, the one the drug lord secretly harbored feelings for, called him. Last night, Kyung-sun had planned to investigate Prosecutor Nam's secret hideout, but was attacked with a stun gun and lost consciousness. Fortunately, the attacker didn't try to kill her. Currently, Kyung-sun said she was on her way and couldn't stop thinking about the drug lord. The drug lord was immediately overjoyed and rushed to meet his dream girl, not forgetting to buy her 2 heart-shaped popcorn cakes. Kyung-sun skillfully and sweetly complimented the drug lord, making him blush. Kyung-sun had a piece of popcorn cake stuck to the corner of her mouth. The drug lord took the piece and put it in his own mouth. Kyung-sun hoped to be able to provide scholarships for orphan children, and the drug lord immediately agreed. But at the same time, the drug lord probed, asking Kyung-sun if she would continue to stay in this area. Kyung-sun replied very firmly, and hoped the drug lord would also continue to stay. In reality, this was Kyung-sun's goal, to buy time for her colleagues. She had to use her charms to keep the drug lord occupied, preventing him from escaping. Her colleagues, Ya-young, Inspector Wu, and the others, were still hiding in the drug dealer's ship's hold. They had found the explosives, believed to be hidden by the drug lord, and were about to pry open the door when they unexpectedly encountered the captain and the big guy. The big guy was still suspicious of Ya-young and Inspector Wu's identities, and the captain was now also affected by this suspicion. Ya-young and the others were told that before the drug lord returned to confirm their identities, no one was allowed to leave. The drug lord then returned to Inspector Wu and the others. Unexpectedly, the drug lord suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed one of his curly-haired underlings. The drug lord directly attacked the curly-haired guy simply because he wasn't performing effectively. He also ordered the others to kill Inspector Wu and his team, regardless of who they were, because he hated ambiguity and uncertainty. Inspector Wu and everyone quickly stood up and tried to fight back in self-defense. Unexpectedly, one of the drug lord's henchmen suddenly stepped forward to vouch for them. The henchman recalled that several years ago, Inspector Wu had fought against a Japanese mob boss in Osaka, and during the fight, the opponent had stabbed him twice in the back with skewers. If the Inspector Wu in front of them was an imposter cop, he wouldn't have scars from the skewer wounds on his back. Hearing this, the drug lord demanded that Inspector Wu take off his shirt to check. Unexpectedly, Inspector Wu really had 2 scars on his back from being stabbed. Therefore, the drug lord completely trusted Inspector Wu and the others. The troublemaking big guy was also beaten to a pulp in a fight by the Thai guy. Later, when they returned to their room, everyone felt confused. How did the henchman know that Inspector Wu had injuries on his back? In reality, the 2 scars were caused a few days ago when, while eating barbecue, Inspector Wu was accidentally stabbed in the back with a fork by Hee-il. After thinking it over carefully, everyone deduced that a few days ago, when Inspector Wu took off his shirt in the room, the henchman had seen it by chance. Although it was still unclear why the henchman had helped them, the urgent task now was to destroy the bombs in the ship's hold. However, immediately afterward, via a mini-phone, everyone was informed by Kyung-sun about Hee-il's medical condition. Filled with worry, they planned to go out together to visit him. After making their plans, they lied to the captain, saying they were going to visit their mother. The captain, with tears in his eyes, agreed. Curly Hair, who was killed by the kingpin, was a good friend of his. The captain asked everyone to hold a memorial service for Curly Hair after they returned. However, before leaving, Fatty heard screams coming from a room. At this moment, the kingpin was interrogating Hee-il's friend. This friend was a former agent of the National Intelligence Service who, a few days ago, had helped Hee-il obtain secret intelligence about the kingpin. The previous day, after learning this news, the kingpin had captured this friend and was now torturing her to find out who she had given his information to. The woman refused to answer, so the kingpin ordered his subordinates to torture her. In particular, after observing and discussing the situation, Inspector Wu and the others decided to stay and rescue the woman, while also taking the opportunity to investigate the subordinate. To carry out their plan, they lied to the captain, saying that instead of visiting their mother, they had decided to do a good deed to the end, starting by holding a memorial service for Curly Hair. The captain was immediately moved to tears, exclaiming, "I've met a living bodhisattva." Inspector Wu secretly met with the subordinate, asking him why he was helping them, and also about the identity of the woman being tortured. The subordinate refused to answer, so everyone surrounded him. With no other choice, the subordinate had to confess truthfully. As it turned out, he was actually a narcotics investigation team police officer, an undercover cop named Sangu, who was also a junior to Inspector Wu and Jia Young. Speaking about his situation, Sangu's tone was melancholic. He was just like Lee Jong-yi in the movie New World. Having worked undercover for many years, he had been abandoned, with no one knowing his real name or his identity as a police officer. The Thai guy, Songsak, was surprised. Usually undercover police were handsome and cool. He had never seen someone like Sangu. Anyway, Sangu was tired of the undercover life. Inspector Wu and the others promised to help him restore his police position. At the same time, from Sangu, they learned the identity of the former National Intelligence Service agent of the woman being tortured. After receiving Inspector Wu's message, he rushed to his friend's bookstore, confirming that his friend had been captured by the kingpin. To save his friend, the inspector planned to storm the drug dealer's lair with Ya Young. To facilitate infiltration, He-il and Kyung-sun didn't mind disguising themselves. He-il dressed as a woman, wearing high heels, a short skirt, and a long wig, looking unbelievably beautiful. He-il and Kyung-sun disguised themselves and went to the drug lord's hideout. The two pretended to be shamans performing a ritual at the request of Jia Young and her companions. In front of the henchmen, they acted superstitious, finally announcing that the ghost of a dead henchman was somewhere on the ship, and the entire ship had to be searched to find it. Taking advantage of this opportunity, under the guidance of undercover police officer Sangu, He-il rushed into the room where his friend was being held and successfully rescued her. Afterwards, He-il handed the friend over to Sangu and instructed him to take the innocent old people in the factory to the police station. Knowing that He-il had completed his mission, Kyung-sun and the others immediately revealed their identities, attacking the henchmen to try and escape. Amidst the chaos, He-il reached the crime boss's office. At that moment, the boss appeared, and the two immediately engaged in a fierce fight. During the altercation, the crime boss grabbed a gun, aimed it at He-il, and demanded his surrender. Unexpectedly, He-il swiftly deflected the gun aside and jumped down to the production workshop with his comrades, making their escape. Unwilling to give up, the crime boss dispatched his henchmen in pursuit. He-il and his crew once again clashed with their pursuers. In a moment of grave danger, Father Han and the nun arrived in a vehicle to rescue them. On the side of the undercover police officer Sang Yu, he also completed his mission, bringing the innocent elderly people to the police station. The captain promised to treat them with leniency. With the mission accomplished, He-il and everyone rested together. Everyone was concerned about Father Han's health condition. In front of his friends, He-il stated that he had previously focused solely on the mission, neglecting to share his pain and small secrets with his friends. From now on, he would no longer keep things hidden. At the same time, the captain held a press conference, announcing a decisive battle against the local flower gang. He-il returned to the seminary, meeting with the principal. He had heard that the principal had met with the archbishop to discuss his situation. The archbishop reprimanded the principal for failing to manage his students properly and argued that the seminary should not directly confront the dark forces. However, the principal had no intention of apologizing. Witnessing He-il's defense of justice, the principal completely changed his perception of him, considering a priest who dared to stand up against injustice like He-il to be a rare find. But in reality, He-il knew that the principal had become a guardian of justice long before him. Du-Wu found old newspapers from many years ago, discovering that when he was young, the principal had stood up to help poor people who were being forcibly relocated. Remembering the past, the friend who had fought alongside him back then had passed away. That day, when he saw He-il bleeding and falling, the principal seemed to see the image of his best friend sacrificing himself. He said that death was not frightening. The important thing was that someone continued the mission, passing on the torch of justice. Because of He-il's words, the principal completely changed the teaching methods of the seminary, allowing Du-woo to lead the students in practicing taekwondo to train their physical strength and spirit. Meanwhile, the decisive battle between He-il's righteous alliance and the drug gang was about to erupt. Based on Sang-Yu's long-term observations, Inspector Wu and Ja Young arrived at a marine shipping warehouse. This location was believed to be the secret base that the flower drug boss used to import and export drugs abroad. By seizing this place, they could stop his drug production and distribution simultaneously. Therefore, the next day, Inspector Wu and everyone else were fully prepared to go to the warehouse and quickly subdue the henchmen inside. Afterwards, they attempted to persuade the warehouse owner to go to the police station and report the flower boss. Meanwhile, Sang-gu met with a customs official who had been bribed by the drug kingpin. Ya Young apprehended him on the spot, effectively cutting off the flower magnate's escape route. In a separate development, Prosecutor Nam received a phone call from a police officer. Several days before He-il was hospitalized, the police had assigned someone to monitor him and discovered that Kyung-sun had visited him. After seeing Kyung-sun at the hospital on surveillance footage, Prosecutor Nam realized that Kyung-sun was working for He-il and that he had been deceived. Initially, Prosecutor Nam intended to reveal Kyung-sun's true intentions to the kingpin, but he changed his mind. In front of Kyung-sun, Prosecutor Nam pretended not to know anything, maintaining a smile and showing concern. Kyung-sun remained completely unaware that her cover had been blown. That evening, she went to Prosecutor Nam's secret base to retrieve all the incriminating evidence inside. Unexpectedly, two men in black suits with knives confronted her at the door. Suddenly, the two men in black were electrocuted and lost consciousness. Kyung-sun was rescued. She saw that her savior was a female colleague from the prosecutor's office. The female colleague revealed the truth to Kyung-sun. She was actually part of the internal investigation team from the Busan District Prosecutor's Office, sent by the chief prosecutor to gather evidence of Prosecutor Nam's illegal activities. Based on the principle of spy recognizes spy, the female colleague had known Kyung-sun's true identity for a long time. The last time Kyung-sun tried to break into Prosecutor Nam's secret base, the female colleague was the one who knocked her unconscious. She said she did it to help Kyung-sun. The female colleague discovered that Prosecutor Nam constantly monitored the surveillance cameras inside the base on his phone. If Kyung-sun had broken in, she would have been immediately recorded. Furthermore, tonight, the female colleague had secretly checked Prosecutor Nam's computer and saw the footage of Kyung-sun visiting He-il in the hospital. She realized that Prosecutor Nam already knew Kyung-sun's real purpose when she approached him. Since her cover was blown, Kyung-sun continued to play her role. That night, she sent Prosecutor Nam a photo of herself getting a massage, suggesting that he should try it too. Prosecutor Nam was completely shocked, wondering why the two men in black hadn't eliminated Kyung-sun. While getting a massage at home, Kyung-sun cursed Prosecutor Nam. At this moment, the kingpin called and asked to meet Kyung-sun late that night. When they met, he said that he would be traveling abroad tomorrow and wanted Kyung-sun to accompany him. Kyung-sun realized that he was planning to escape and refused on the spot. Moreover, the kingpin still didn't know her real identity, which meant Prosecutor Nam hadn't revealed it. He surmised that Prosecutor Nam was trying to distance himself from the drug kingpin, deliberately withholding information in order to harm him. That evening, the kingpin met with Prosecutor Nam again and asked why he hadn't told him that He used to be an agent for the National Intelligence Service. Prosecutor Nam hesitated, but the kingpin saw through his intentions. Prosecutor Nam wanted to let him and Father Cha fight each other for his own benefit, to protect himself. Prosecutor Nam changed his mind and told the kingpin that Kyung-sun and He-il were on the same side. With things having reached this point, the kingpin decided not to linger. He immediately retreated, ordering his underlings to pack all the money into containers and take it away. Once everything was ready, the kingpin had Kyung-sun kidnapped before withdrawing. He intended to activate the bombs and poison gas he had previously installed. But unfortunately, the activation program kept showing error messages. The kingpin was furious. But when he saw Kyung-sun tied up in the vehicle, he seemed to hatch another plan. That day, Hee-il contacted Kyung-sun, but the person who answered the phone was the Kingpin. He knew that Hee-il and his companions had destroyed his bombs and poison gas, and now Kyung-sun was his last bargaining chip. Realizing Kyung-sun was in danger, Hee-il immediately raced to the church on his motorcycle. He found Kyung-sun tied up in the middle of the sanctuary, with a bomb strapped to his chest and hypodermic needles poised to inject into both sides of his neck. The Kingpin told Hee-il over the phone that the needles contained a lethal dose of narcotics. Once injected, Kyung-sun would die instantly. If Hee-il wanted to save Kyung-sun, he had to use the gun nearby to take his own life. There was only one bullet in the gun. Hee-il had only one chance. Kyung-sun begged Hee-il not to do anything foolish for her sake. While Hee-il was still hesitating, the Kingpin began counting down from 3 minutes. Everything depended on Hee-il's decision. Without any hesitation, Hee-il chose to sacrifice himself, but unexpectedly, his companion, Father Han, suddenly roared like a lion, emitting ultrasonic waves. The nun standing behind him seized the opportunity to throw playing cards, easily shattering the needle vials. It turned out that Father Han was also a specially trained operative. The crisis was thus diffused with ease. The Kingpin, enraged, immediately planned his departure. Of course, resolving the crisis was also due to the foresight of the two. That evening, the Kingpin's subordinates went to check the bombs and poison gas that had been placed on the road and told road workers to take another route. But in reality, the road workers were Hee-il's people. While the subordinates took a detour, Hee-il had already arranged for a chemical weapons disposal team to remove the poison gas. Soon after, 2 of Hee-il's colleagues disguised themselves and openly went to the drug dealer's base, quickly disarming the bombs. The Kingpin was almost cornered. Hee-il's righteous alliance had won an initial victory. Some other good news was that Ja Young was promoted to become the new head of the drug investigation team. The personnel file of undercover cop Sang-woo was found, thereby restoring his police status. Additionally, thanks to the efforts of the police station chief, the high-ranking official colluding with Prosecutor Nam was also being investigated by the supervisory agency. Now, all that was needed was to find the Kingpin who was in hiding and then bring Prosecutor Nam, who was in cahoots with him, to justice, and the situation would be a complete success. Kyung-sun made it clear to Prosecutor Nam that she would expose his collusion with the drug Kingpin. Prosecutor Nam, however, was not afraid, saying that Kyung-sun had no evidence, and even if she did, he could completely deny it. Facing the shameless Prosecutor Nam, Kyung-sun didn't know what to do, only secretly cursing to find a loophole in Prosecutor Nam's defense. Kyung-sun and her female colleague sneaked into his secret base. The two wore masks, and after entering, sprayed UV revealing light on the surveillance, but couldn't find any documents anywhere. Luckily, the female colleague noticed a data transmission device in the base. The cunning Prosecutor Nam had stored the data somewhere beforehand. The question was, where exactly was that place? On the other hand, due to the unfavorable situation, Prosecutor Nam planned to cut his losses and save himself by cooperating with the leader of the drug gang. The leader betrayed the Kingpin, attaching a tracking device to the bottom of the Kingpin's car, and then revealed the Kingpin's location to Prosecutor Nam. Prosecutor Nam planned to contact Interpol to arrest the Kingpin at the exact moment he was crossing the border. Even that very evening, Prosecutor Nam contacted Interpol, requesting that if the cartel boss resisted, the police were authorized to shoot him dead on the spot. Simultaneously, Hee-il's friend, Boss Ko, was also in contact with the captain. Earlier that day, at Boss Ko's instigation, the captain had stolen the money the cartel boss intended to use to escape. Completely outmaneuvering the boss, seeing the container that was supposed to be full of cash now completely empty, the cartel boss was both humiliated and enraged, immediately executing a subordinate according to the rules. He then called the captain to grill him, but the captain was unfazed, stating that the cartel boss had absolutely no way of finding him. Boss Ko, outwardly pretending to cooperate with the captain, falsely claimed he would help him launder the money, but secretly hid a tracking device inside the money container. That evening, Boss Ko brought over health tonics for the captain, using the opportunity to probe for the cartel boss's whereabouts. The captain openly revealed the address, stating the cartel boss was at some port. Upon receiving the information, He-il immediately prepared to take action with his colleagues. Ya-young was the vanguard in this operation. That evening, the captain was feasting with his subordinates. They had hidden the stolen money, not intending to share it with Boss Ko as agreed. Just then, Ya-young led her team in, intending to completely eliminate the captain and his cronies. However, the captain had prepared in advance, immediately summoning a large group of his men to confront the police. Ya-young and her colleagues exerted all their strength, but were still outnumbered. As the captain gloated, suddenly the seminary student, Du-woo, arrived with a group of his classmates to provide assistance. Concerned for his colleagues, He-il had contacted Du-woo earlier. Upon hearing about the operation to eliminate evil and injustice, the passionate Du-woo immediately called upon like-minded friends to join the mission. It truly was a case of training soldiers for 1,000 days, using them for an hour. Right then, in front of the captain, Du-woo and his classmates enthusiastically performed a spirited taekwondo warm-up. In addition to Du-woo, even the stubborn school principal was participating in this operation. The principal was even more aggressive, directly bringing Molotov cocktails and urging the students to charge forward. Unexpectedly, the principal's shoulder pain flared up, and a Molotov cocktail fell right at his feet in the chaotic scene. The students didn't care much. They yelled and charged forward, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the captain's men. The obese subordinate didn't see Du-woo as a threat, but then Du-woo threw a powerful punch, and the fat guy immediately fell. The classmates also beat their opponents black and blue. Ya-young and Du-woo achieved a major victory, but in the chaos, the captain seized the opportunity to escape. The captain ran to the secret location where he was hiding the container of money, thinking he would have the last laugh, but Boss Ko had tracked him down using the tracking device in the container. The captain tried to compromise and share the money, but Boss Ko grabbed him tightly, refusing to let go. Meanwhile, the cornered drug lord arrived at the port, intending to escape by crossing the border. At that moment, Prosecutor Nam arrived with Interpol, demanding the cartel boss surrender. He again urged the police to shoot the cartel boss dead on the spot. As the cartel boss was trying to escape, He-il, Kyung-sun, and Inspector Woo arrived, presenting their police badges to Interpol, hoping they would be patient. However, the police didn't care, insisting on shooting the cartel boss dead right there and then. The He-il and his crew rushed to dissuade him. If the boss died, the corrupt prosecutor would be free. While they were arguing heatedly, a strange noise echoed, and something fell in a high-speed arc. Unexpectedly, it was the aircraft cargo door, but as luck would have it, 3 of the boss's henchmen were crushed to death instantly, and an Interpol agent was injured. Unfortunately, the boss used the opportunity to escape. That evening, He-il and his friends sat around chatting. Because of that cargo door, they were returning empty-handed tonight, but thankfully, the prosecutor hadn't been able to use a deal involving a person to eliminate the boss. Therefore, the prosecutor was now like a cornered dog, both fearing the boss would kill him and worrying about his corruption being exposed. Consequently, he contacted high-ranking government officials, using secrets he held about them to blackmail them, demanding a transfer to Seoul. Under duress, the officials had no choice but to agree. Before long, the prosecutor was appointed as a prosecutor at the Central District Prosecutor's Office. Seung Kyung-sun knew this position was significant, capable of taking down almost anyone except the president. But that same evening, He-il and his team also received good news. The young altar boy at the church, Sang-yeon, who had been in a coma for several days, finally woke up. He-il and his team took turns talking to Sang-yeon on the phone. Fueled by this positive news, everyone was filled with confidence, determined to fight to the end against the dark forces. But the bad news wasn't over. That night, the escaped boss bought a gun. After acquiring the weapon, he looked at a photo on his phone of a woman who looked almost identical to Kyung-sun, his mood incredibly somber. The next day, He-il and the others went to the church to pray, resolved to fight to the death together. That same day, Kyung-sun and He-il filed a lawsuit against the prosecutor, detailing all of his crimes, and announced to the media that the indictment was only the beginning, with even more compelling evidence to come. Under pressure from Kyung-sun, the government established a truth investigation committee, planning to hold a hearing and then issue a summons to the prosecutor. Preparing to conduct the first round of hearings as the prosecuting attorney, Kyung-sun declared that the prosecutor was completely corrupt, colluding with a drug trafficking gang. Kyung-sun played a video at the hearing. The video showed a dialogue between Father Han and a nun, both accusing the prosecutor of murdering a former prosecutor and disposing of the body, accompanied by photographic evidence of the former prosecutor's remains. Faced with the accusation, the cunning and sly prosecutor didn't confess. Instead, he lied, stating that he had deliberately approached the drug trafficking gang for a secret investigation, pretending to be corrupt in order to solve the case. Kyung-sun continued to testify, recounting how the prosecutor had arranged for her to meet with the drug lord. Hee-il also presented evidence that the prosecutor had once threatened him. Unfortunately, video, audio, and other evidence of the prosecutor's collusion with officials at all levels had not yet been found. The prosecutor exploited this weakness, claiming to be a clean prosecutor and that it was all a fabrication by Hee-il and the others. As he said this, he even put on an act, pretending to wipe away tears at the hearing. Hee-il and the other two were so enraged that they couldn't help but curse, resulting in them being kicked out of the hearing. At this point in the hearing, also present were the police chief and various merchants involved in the drug trade. Just as one of the merchants was about to testify, he discovered that his family's lives were being threatened by the male prosecutor. To protect his family, the merchant was forced to recant his testimony, falsely claiming that everything was the work of the drug kingpin and that the prosecutor was not involved. Due to this false testimony, the hearing concluded with the male prosecutor cleared of suspicion. Soon after, a second hearing took place. This time, the male prosecutor had sought out a high-ranking official within the party who was in cahoots with him. This high-ranking official testified that the male prosecutor was not a corrupt prosecutor, but rather a pioneer in the fight against corruption and drug investigations. However, what the high-ranking official and the male prosecutor didn't expect was that this time, Hee-il and the others had brought a secret weapon that was more than capable of taking him down. As it turned out, after the first hearing, construction workers had discovered a data transmission device within a wall. Coincidentally, this device was connected to a house registered under the prosecutor's name. Through a search, Ya-young located the source of the device behind a picture frame on the wall of the house and discovered a trove of data. Inside, there was recorded, archived evidence of crimes committed by high-ranking officials that the male prosecutor had secretly taped, including a recording of a phone call between the male prosecutor and the high-ranking official colluding with him. In the call, the male prosecutor said that the high-ranking official's son was involved in drugs, but he would help his son get away with it. Beyond this high-ranking party official, the records implicated over 50 other high-ranking officials in collusion with the prosecutor. However, faced with evidence as clear as day, the male prosecutor stubbornly denied all guilt. Unexpectedly, at that very moment, a gunshot rang out in the hearing. The shooter was the drug kingpin. Since the first hearing, he had been keeping a close watch on the male prosecutor and had been planning to infiltrate the hearing with his subordinates. So, the kingpin kidnapped a congressman, using the congressman's car to conveniently get to the scene. Now, with a gun in his hand, he brazenly took control of the entire hearing, pointing the gun directly at the male prosecutor, the one who had betrayed him. He didn't realize that the gun would jam at such a crucial moment. Inspector Wu immediately recognized that the kingpin must have bought this gun from a merchant specializing in fake weapons, a con artist who preyed on people in the business. Seeing that the gun wouldn't work, the kingpin pulled out a knife. To stop him, Hee-il fought him hand to hand. With a righteous conviction in his heart, Hee-il triumphantly defeated his opponent. The kingpin was arrested. The male prosecutor was arrested due to his exposed crimes, and Hee-il and the others were greeted with applause from everyone. Kyung-sun became a prosecutor representing justice in front of the media. But Prosecutor Nam was still fighting tooth and nail, trying to bribe the two police officers at the crucial moment. An eerie gust of wind blew, and a playing card suddenly flew and got stuck in Prosecutor Nam's throat. He completely lost his mind and was taken away by the two officers right then and there. It turned out that the eerie gust of wind was Hee-il using the lion's roar technique, thanks to Father Han. Not long after, Hee-il and the others' righteous actions were reported in the press. Even the images of the principal and the student Du-woo fighting the drug dealers were leaked. For a time, the school became famous, and the enrollment rate skyrocketed, much to the principal's delight. Woo also received a gift from Hee-il, a hilarious photo of the two of them together. Hee-il instructed Woo that life is a constant struggle, and to never stop carrying the will of God to continue serving the vulnerable. Looking at the photo with Hee-il, Woo's fighting spirit ignited. After everything was over, the cardinal sent his secretary to meet Hee-il and the others to commend them for carrying out the light's mission. The cardinal gifted them a sparkling gold cross as a token. That day, Hee-il and his friends happily took a group photo, not forgetting to Photoshop in Mr. Ko, who was absent. But at the same time, Kyung-sun resigned as a prosecutor, and Inspector Woo was suspended from duty. Both became unemployed, pondering what to do next. Hee-il immediately came up with the idea that Kyung-sun should run for the National Assembly, becoming a force representing justice in the National Assembly. Kyung-sun took his advice and started a busy campaign. Thanks to her image as the passionate prosecutor, she quickly gained a support rate equal to her opponent. Tonight was the night the election results were announced. Kyung-sun and her friends nervously sat in front of the TV counting down. Unexpectedly, a friend accidentally spilled coffee on the electrical outlet, causing a power outage, and they didn't get to see the election results. In the days that followed, Hee-il continued to carry his faith and courage, constantly carrying out his righteous mission. One night, a woman was kidnapped, and suddenly Hee-il fell from the sky, landing on the car carrying the kidnapped woman. The aggressive opponent rushed towards Hee-il, who, with sharp eyes, clenched his fist and vowed to send these corrupt people to hell.